Hi guys, welcome to Monitoring and Evaluation Made Simple. I'm your host, Coach Alexander. I want to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this channel, and today I'll be doing a voice note. I haven't done a voice note in a very long time. Truth be told, I miss it because usually when I do voice notes, they are rich in content, they are longer than the usual videos, and it gives us the opportunity to discuss issues related to monitoring and evaluation. As usual, in the link description, there is a link to one of my free ebooks. Please take note of that. But you also have a link to other of my various channels where you can learn more about M&E. So today we'll be talking about the monitoring and evaluation software, why it's important for organizations to have M&E software. Okay, so this is quite a long video, so please take note of the timestamps in the description below if you want to skip certain parts of this voice note. Okay, so without wasting any more time, let's get straight into business. Okay, so why do we need monitoring and evaluation software? Well, I think from a personal point of view, it has to do with the automation. All right. You know, when you're doing paper-based M&E, where you have to record things through the paper, then collect things using the paper questionnaires, then feed them into a software, you know, it's kind of cumbersome and time consuming. And I've been there before, guys. I've been doing this for 10 years now. I know what I'm talking about. It just isn't really friendly. So coming up with these M&E softwares, a few days ago I was reviewing a video on a M&E software called Tula Data. It's a good software. I would recommend maybe you try it out. But one of the things I know is that you may need to be trained on how to use it, okay? And it may not be user-friendly at first, but as time goes on, you get a hang of it. But that's not the only software I have used. There are so many other softwares that could be out there ready for you to use them. So having the monitoring and evaluation softwares is so important because of one, automation. When just by the click of the button you're able to generate reports. It's also there are less errors when it comes to data analysis and reporting. If you've noticed that we are prone to human error most of the times, and that's what creates a bit of tension on the users who get our work. All right, so when you use these softwares, there are usually less errors. In fact, I wouldn't say it's a problem with the software. It could be a problem with you if you've made a mistake when you're entering certain data. Okay, another thing is that there are so many features that are in these softwares. Okay, take for instance, like the one I was reviewing a few days ago. It gives you the opportunity to map out your project implementation. Where is your project happening? Who is actually implementing it? How are you moving towards achieving your targets? Okay, so many of those things are what make you appreciate what it is you're doing right and what it is you're doing wrong. Okay, so in the long run, you find that it really helps you do the right thing because you are learning from your mistakes and you're capturing information in real time in such a way that it is transparent, because these kind of softwares, especially if they are hosted at a central point, can be accessed by management, and the management will be able to feed that information to different stakeholders who can benefit from it. So I think that's what I can say about these softwares, and you really need to try it out. Okay, it's worth a try. Of course, there may be issues of the cost, which will come to later in this video to discuss how much you should actually pay for these things. but at the end of the day, in the short term it may seem expensive, but in the long run you stand to become a winner out of all this. Okay, so how do these softwares work? All right. Well, from my experience, it's really highly technical. The developers of these softwares are obviously well versed in computer technology, and they obviously know how best they can either try to fulfill the functions that you want or the functions that the software itself has been designed. So all in all, the way it works is that what I've seen in common is you can use this software for data collection, for data analysis, for reporting, and also for drawing lessons learned and conclusions. So there are two ways in which you can collect this data. You can actually import this data into these softwares using Excel files or other kind of formats that it accommodates. Or you can actually use field officers, either give them equipment in form of a mobile phone whereby they are collecting this data using mobile technology, and as they are collecting it, it's automatically updating in a central point known as the database, okay, which is hosted in some websites, as is the case with Tula Data. You have this software actually online, and it's really, for me, the way I understand why they have this online on their website, it's obviously a business sustainability plan on their part, because there's a monthly subscription attached to it, so you have to continuously pay to access that service. So when you have those things uploaded, because M&D is basically the data collection, the analysis, and the report writing. Once you have those things uploaded, it's up to you now to decide what kind of reports you want generated. So I'm sure you've used SPSS before. Okay, it's another software that is used for data analysis. I'm sure you've used it. If you haven't used it, Google it. When you analyze certain variables, the reports are generated automatically. So it's the same thing with these M&D softwares. You have, at the click of your button, reports generated automatically. And the beauty about it is that they are not just generating reports which are not relevant to your needs. Okay, and this is where it gets interesting, because these reports definitely have to be aligned to the project's objectives and goals. You've got the indicators, which I always talk about. And looking at what I saw in the previous video I did on one of these M&D softwares, Tula Data, actually you can even put in a target so that you're able to know if you are moving towards achieving your target. So those are one of the beauties about this thing. But like I mentioned earlier on, it's quite technical, or maybe even to say very technical, as a matter of fact. And the reason is that I think M&D is quite technical. If you come to think about it, it needs really the minds that are critical and that are looking for certain data that can fulfill their information needs. But however, these companies that produce these monitoring and evaluation softwares, they are very clever, okay? And I'll tell you why. They know that once they offload this software, this tool to many companies around the world, you won't just be paying for that software alone. They know that you come back to them to ask for training, which is the best thing to do. But I just don't think that they have to charge for that training. It should be part of the package. So when the training is done, that is when you're given a very thorough walkthrough on how the software is used. Okay. So now, what another question I have is, how do you actually select the software you should use? All right. How do you make that informed decision and say, okay, this is the software that is best to monitor and evaluate this project? Okay. Well, there isn't any really hard black and white way of, it's not written in black and white that you should do this and that, but it's really about you as an organization, how you feel about the system. I have to tell you that complicated things are difficult to really use in an organization. Something that's complicated is hard because you need a lot of learning, and time, unfortunately, is limited when it comes to implementation of activities. It's always going to be limited. So, what I can advise, if you're considering getting a monitoring and evaluation software online, or you buy it from some kind of from a shop somewhere, I would strongly advise that first of all you test it. They should be able to give you a free trial that will allow you and your team to thoroughly test the system. And the testing phase is the crucial phase, actually, because you want to convince yourself that this is something you can use. Obviously, before you considered getting a system, you may have been using something already. It may have been working, but all you were looking for was something better. So it's really up to you to use the free trial, test it, find out for yourself whether it's achieving the goals you really want. I go for simplicity. Okay, that's just me. But you may be looking at other aspects of it, whether it can import certain data files, whether you can analyze things in a certain way. And maybe I have to tell you this. That's why the channel, the M&D channel you come to, is called M&D Made Simple, because life, guys, should be simple. You shouldn't have to scratch your head every now and then. The guys who developed these softwares, they are the ones who should be scratching their heads, actually. They should be the ones coming up with products that are going to make our lives easier. All right. And that is why when I was reviewing the other software, the Tula data, I said that actually the best way they should have promoted, I mean, like if of course they have that walkthrough video, but I think they should have also put some sample project there that helps us fully understand exactly how this thing works. It's amazing that many of oftentimes you'll find an organization procuring a very expensive system simply because they can afford it, and simply because it can make them look better. But you find that maybe 2 to 3 years down the line, they are not using it. And it's sad because when you have something you've invested so much in and you're not actually using it, it can be really, what word can I use? Sad, anyway. That's the best word I can use. It's sad because that money should have been used to probably increase the salaries of M&D personnel, or it could have been used to buy more equipment for M&D personnel. But when you have a system, a software that's just sitting in the organization and they're paying monthly subscriptions every month for it, it can be really, it's costly, in the long run, really costly. So I think before you choose to use an M&D software, you have to ensure that what you're choosing is what you use, okay? And then it's also, it shouldn't just be like, if you're an organization who have 50 personnel, at least 50% of those 50, which of course is 25, should be well conversant with the system. You shouldn't just have one person who's really good at it. Then it defeats the whole purpose, because when you're running an M&D system, it has to be sustainable, it has to be sustained and owned by the people who are using it. So really that is key. So when selecting this M&D software, set for yourself a criteria that you know will work, that will make you have this system for a long time, okay? So how do you adopt the M&D software? All right. How do you adopt? We're looking at how you select, but how do you actually adopt this software? Okay, so the adoption part, guys, is pretty simple, but you have to do things by the book when it comes to, actually, it's not just adopting, but adapting it to your organization. So now, the first thing is that you need to be sure that your organization has an M&D system, all right? And sometimes we tend to rush. We tend to say, okay, let's just get an M&D software because it looks good, okay? But that's not the right way to go. You first need to ensure that in the organization, before you get this software, you have an M&D system in place. People tend to confuse things, actually. They tend to think that an M&D system is just a digital system. It's a database. Others have called it a database. But an M&D system is not a database. It could be a digital something, but it's not really it's not always digital. Digitalizing it is just more like upgrading it to a point where you have automation. But an M&D system is you, your fellow staff, the projects you are running, the M&D, the monitoring interventions you are doing, and the evaluation interventions you are doing, the budget that you've attached to those interventions, how you collect the information, how you analyze it, how you report on it, that is the M&D system. Okay, so even if you're currently using a paper-based way of collecting data, it all is part of the M&D system, okay? And it has to be obviously properly documented, okay? So you should have had this written somewhere that shows that, okay, this indeed is our M&D system. Okay, so back to the question, how do you adopt the monitoring and evaluation software? So first of all, you have to ensure that you have a system in place. If you don't have an M&D system in place, then you cannot procure a software, an M&D software. Okay, you can't procure it because it will just defeat the purpose. If you look at the Tula data that I was reviewing a few days ago, you can see that it has been designed to accommodate the different kinds of frameworks. You've got the M&D framework, you've got the logical framework matrix. It has been designed to accommodate those things. So how do you actually know that your organization has an M&D system or not. Okay? Some people will tell you we have a system, we have an M&D system, but in actual sense, they don't have an M&D system. What they have is a reporting system. You see, a reporting system is where you generate reports and it ends there. An M&D system doesn't just generate reports, but it learns from those reports and it offers recommendations for improvement. So the thing is that one identifying mark that can help you know whether you have an M&D system or not is to ask yourself whether you have done any evaluation of your project. Perhaps you are doing monitoring of your project, but you are probably not doing any evaluation. So if you've not done an evaluation of your project, you don't have an M&D system. Another way you can tell whether you have a system or not is if you have a framework, of course. You should have a M&D framework. You should also know what it is you're actually collecting. What data are you collecting? Why are you collecting it? How are you collecting it? Who are you reporting this to? Those are questions which the M&D system will answer. And then also, you may have these things, but it's also good to ask yourself whether these things have been properly documented. If you've properly documented these aspects of the M&D system, then you do have an M&D system. If you've properly documented it, if you've documented your M&D plan, if you've documented your M&D framework, if you've documented the tools you're using, the procedures you're using, then you have a system. So it is only after you have a system that is when you can now ask yourself, I think it's time for us to have an upgrade. Let us get a monitoring and evaluation software. So the software is the stage where you've agreed as a team that it will make our lives better because one, there will be little errors or there will be no errors at all. Two, reports will be delivered on time. Three, there will be automation. Four, learning will be much more easier. Finding the weaknesses will be much more easier. That is what the software is really supposed to do. So, when you have confirmed that the M&D system is there, then you can procure a software. But there's something you need to also understand. Before you even procure the software, is your M&D system running correctly? Because you need to seal off the weaknesses. You need to seal off the loopholes to be able to best determine that indeed your software, once you adapt it to your system, is going to perform. So now one thing I also have to tell you guys, this is very, very important. In fact, maybe it's the most important thing. If your M&D system is not performing properly, if your M&D system is not performing properly, don't expect the M&D software to perform any better. Okay? Because you are adapting the software to your system, your M&D system. You are linking the two. So now if there are weaknesses in your system already, which you've not sealed off, then the software won't perform any better. And that can be a real challenge, guys. That can be a real challenge. And do you know what happens when you procure a software which already is adopting problems from an M&D system, do you know what will happen? There will be even more errors. There will be more challenges. The more the challenges, the more errors, the bigger the cost it is to the organization. So at the end of the day, what we are saying is that we need to rise above our challenges. And we need to do things the right way. We need to do things step by step. I have to mention that I am well versed when it comes to creating these M&D systems. So you can write to me. My email is in the description below. Okay, now finally, how much should this system cost? I have to tell you guys, in my own view, it shouldn't be expensive. Okay, of course, that's what we all want. We don't want expensive things. It should only get more expensive as you add more features to the software. All right. But if, for instance, you are collecting, let's say, doing a baseline survey, okay, just for as an example, doing a baseline survey costs you $10,000. Doing annual reporting, annual monitoring interventions cost you the same $10,000. If the M&D software is going to cost anything more, it shouldn't go beyond 100%. You see what I'm saying? Unless you are adding more features. One of the things I've realized is that people don't want to spend money for things they know could be cheaper. They can find something cheaper elsewhere. People wouldn't, even I wouldn't. So if you are going to procure this software, why should it be more expensive or way more expensive than what you're currently using, the system you're currently using? That's a question you should ask yourself. Another thing is that what I've noticed is it's really up to us to justify why it should be even expensive at all. Because a system, think of it this way. If you introduce computers to an organization where you had a lot of laborers there, okay, so what I'm saying is that, let's say you realize that the world is moving in a digital situation. We are digitalizing everything. Artificial intelligence is coming up. Okay, so what does that mean? You won't have a lot of manpower actually doing the jobs. You have machines, okay, in some situations. So now the reason they've gone that route is probably because it's much more cheaper. Okay, so if you are going to introduce a software, why should it be expensive? You need to justify that. It shouldn't be also too expensive. It shouldn't be more expensive than what you're currently using. So as a rule of thumb, let's say you go to the Tula Data website. Okay, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Tula Data is an M&D software which you can look at it online. I was testing it a few days ago. It's not bad, but I can't really say much at this point because I haven't really dived deep into how to use it. So if your M&D currently costs the organization $50,000 annually, then why should it be $100,000 when you have this M&D software? I would think that perhaps the cost should reduce, maybe even to $45,000. So what I've noticed is that if they're going to charge you a big bill, let's say you have these developers charge you a big bill for this system, they're obviously going to tell you, we're going to come and train you how to use it, which is okay. But the question still comes, what does it do to your cost? Why is it so high? Are there additional features that we don't know about? Because one, internet is becoming cheaper than it was 10 years ago. So if it's an issue of internet, I mean, internet is cheaper. If it's an issue of storage, are there any cheaper options to store this data? Because they may be saying, no, you have to store it with us. You have to store it with us. But could there be cheaper options? So you need to ask these developers whether there are cheaper options. If you notice that the budget is too huge for you, try to negotiate with the developers. Come up with an understanding. Because I personally feel that to have these M&D softwares around, it's a good thing. But you don't need to stress yourself if the system you already have is working perfectly. All right? So it's a challenge for the developers to make sure that what they are doing is not ripping people off, taking advantage of a situation. But it should be a win-win situation. We know that there's a business component to all these things, but there's also a developmental aspect. Many of these organizations, especially the NGOs, they are trying to make a difference in this world. So there is need to really think. What is that term, proverb they always think outside the box. Okay, so I hope you really enjoyed this voice note. It's been a long time since I did a voice note, so I may have been a bit slow in some areas, but I sure hope you really enjoyed this voice note. So please take good care of yourself. Write to me whenever you have the chance to. I've been your host, Coach Alexander, and see you on the other side. Bye.